welcome again to another session of In Conversation. And we are very, very delighted to come back after a short break. I am going to share my screen and we'll start in a short while. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Perfect. Thank you. Well, it is 2:32, so we are going to be starting right now. Thanks so much, all of you, for joining us to our In Conversation Building Your Innovation Dream Team. To begin, we respectfully acknowledge that we are primarily located on the traditional lands that are now known as part of Treaties 6, 7, and 8 and homeland of the Métis. We respect the sovereignty, lands, histories, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations. Now, the Health Innovation Hub is a community incubator for innovators and entrepreneurs who are working towards better human health outcomes. Our clients are entrepreneurs and researchers. We actually help researchers who want to create a startup or who have already created one and they're looking for support. We also help students and trainees, including current and past students who want to transition into the industry, so want that connection. And we help service providers who want to tap into either the clients that we have, like the entrepreneurs, or into the other services which are available at the university. And most of our services are around office and lab space. We have an incubation space here and Enterprise Square. We also provide programming support and we help people to navigate the ecosystem, which is here in Edmonton. We also help with community, doing lots of events such as In Conversation. We also have an in-person event called the Health Innovators Meetup. Our business model is usually around an initial application. It's an ongoing rolling process. So you can find it on our website. You apply and then we analyze it. And based on the areas of support, we have that discussion and it's a hands-on process. And we monitor your progress to see where you are at and what are the other things that are needed. At present, we are at 51 companies, largely at the University of Alberta. If you think about the different sectors, then we have companies in pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, medical devices, digital health, including a few service providers who are members of the Health Innovation Hub. And we are, as I said, that we're largely located all across the University of Alberta. Our companies have had quite a large amount of success. We have been responsible and we have actually helped to them to find funding to create those connections which have led to those to help with job creations as well as intellectual property. If you have any questions about how we could help you or anybody you know, then please reach out to us either through phone, email, website, or LinkedIn. And I have two excellent team members here, Marina and Ife, who would be posting throughout this presentation different blurbs. So be sure to follow the chat because you could find all this information through the chat. And now, without much further ado, I am going to open up to In Conversation, Building Your Innovation Dream Team. And I would like to ask Shannon Phillips and Tristan Ham, the two of us who are going to present about Unbounded Thinking and how to build your innovation dream team. Over to you, Shannon and Tristan.
Thank you so much, Paramita, and the rest of the team. I know it only shows my face up on the screen there, but I'm joined with Tristan Hand from Unbounded as well. Tristan, you want to give a little bit of an intro about yourself, and I'll bring the screen up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I've been around for hundreds of years. No, I'm a jack of all trades, really. So a lot of my background comes in actually theater, weirdly enough. But more than that, I spent a good long while working in human services and social work and child protection, learning a lot about people, learning a lot about learning styles, a lot about adult learners and things like that. And then more recently, I've been in the tech space and really getting into that area of entrepreneurship, of innovation and things like that. And then even more recently, since January, had joined the Unbounded Thinking team. And I'm there as a partner, as a storyteller, as the hype man to add to this already incredible team. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Tristan. I'm just going to check in just to make sure, thumbs up, that you can see the screen.
Yeah, looks good.
We're good. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about who we are, because, hey, we've got the platform to do it, right, Tristan? But my background, educational-wise, biomedical science, back home in the great country of Australia, and then moved to Canada and been working in organizational change management and organizational behavior, just really trying to understand more around the psychology of business and innovation now. And yeah, that's what led to Ali Wilson, co-founder, is not here today, coming up with the idea of creating a company to really explore how we innovate. And that's pretty much us. So I'll jump into it. You know, as I introduce myself, I'm Shannon, Tristan as well. And what what I was trying to dive into there was that we're really all about trying to improve how we innovate, right? Everybody's out there talking about what we innovate, but when it comes to how we innovate, it gets super messy, right? So with that in mind, what we're all about is trying to build what we call internal innovation ecosystems. And we'll talk more about that soon. But to throw it kind of to Tristan to kick us off, let's get started.
Yeah. So one of our favorite movies, Shannon and I, we love Back to the Future 2, which is an absolutely fun look at the future and what could be. I mean, by that time, we were meant to have self-lacing shoes. We were meant to have flying cars and all things like that. So it's a pretty wild prediction of the future. I'm interested, really quick, just as a bit of fun, if everybody could think maybe 50 years from now, what are shoes going to look like? Well, what is the future of the shoe industry? I would love it if people would just take a second and throw it into the chat. What are we going to be looking at as far as shoes in the future? Connected to your phones. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, we got shoe phones. We're kind of what was that? Smart? Matthew Smart? No. The invisible shoes. Get Smart. There it is.
Get Smart. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, invisible shoes, size adjusting shoes. Love it. Yeah. More focused on sustainability, probably less leather. Yeah. So the the materials of the shoes will be different. Virtual shoes. I love it. We'll just have like little cameras on our feet that will project whatever shoes. Walking on bare feet, quite possibly. Yeah. Part of your regular tech-enabled suit, part of your power suit, perhaps. Absolutely. That's an incredible little snapshot of the future there, folks, to give us an idea about what is possible. And what's lovely about that little exercise is that none of us here are really shoe salespeople. We are not in the sales of shoes industry per se. And so we're not necessarily constrained by what is possible in the shoe industry, by what has been tried before and things like that. We're all not from the same lens when we look at the innovation of shoes. And that's kind of the point. And we have another example here for you. And this one is what happens when we get 10 Steve Jobs onto the team. Right? We've got all these incredible innovator, but all from the same lens, the exact same lens. So what happens when you get 10 Steve Jobs on a team? Well, you're going to end up with the iPad still, really, because they're all focused. They all think the same. They're all looking at the problem from the same lens, and thus will probably attack it in a very similar manner. And this is kind of the point of what we're talking about here. And I'll hand that over to Shannon.
Thanks, Tristan. So just the agenda for the next hour, we'll probably talk for about 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up to some interesting questions, which I'm sure that they'll come from everyone. But first up, we're going to give just a little bit more of a brief info about who we are, and then we'll talk about cognitive diversity. After that, we really want to share our approach to how we tackle cognitive diversity through our own thinking profiles. And then we'll wrap it up by looking at how everyone on the call can take it away and go and build your own dream teams. So with that, we kind of already introduced ourselves a little bit, but our team is made up of three. I've talked about my background, but Ali Wilson, who's not here today, she's an engineer by education. So you can kind of see where this is going in terms of how we think. So Ali brings that structural side to Unbounded and very much keeps Tristan and I on track once you better get to know us throughout the session. But yeah, Tristan, you've already introduced yourself there, but he's our hype guy, right? And we'll talk more about how Tristan and I work together once we jump into it. So as I mentioned earlier, at Unbounded, we were all about creating those internal innovation ecosystems, right? And this is for all types of startups, organizations, anyone who really needs to innovate and realizes that it's a part of their survival now, right? The challenge we're faced with nowadays is that traditional business thinking where we talk about planning and strategy, and we combine those words to be strategic planning, right? It's best suited to those static environments. But the thing is that we don't live in these static environments anymore. So the amount of change going on around us, it's like nothing we've ever seen before, right? You've got Elon Musk within a lifetime changing the industry on so many different things, right? And that's within, the scope of 20 years. So, we're talking about now companies needing to build this, what we call a search function, right? That innovation ecosystem in our business to complement that traditional execute function, which is that normal day-to-day operations that we all know about. So with that in mind, we created Unbounded to really turn innovation from the buzzword, which we're all kind of sick of hearing, and you're going to hear it 50 times again today, into a system, that ecosystem that actually helps businesses survive. So how do we do that? There's 4 areas for where we focus on: building structure, building skills. We have a few training programs for that. Solving problems. That's all about the workshops that we have. And then challenge thinking. So that's what we're focusing on today. We have an area what we call innovation psychology, and within that we have cognitive diversity. And we're just going to focus on that today. We didn't want to overwhelm everybody with too many concepts, so we're really just going to dig into cognitive diversity, which is really about building diversity into how we innovate.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is like a fairly new concept in the scheme of things. And so a lot of people are debating it. They're having a lot of conversations about this, around what cognitive means and how it is measured, because that is part of it, is how do we measure that as well? Now, keep in mind, this is a little different to the neurodiversity cognition that some people kind of associate this with, things like with ADHD or Tourette's or autism and things like that. We're kind of looking at a different area. And we're going to be talking about this after the presentation today, because we have the opportunity to talk to a whole room full of science entrepreneurs, amazing innovators within the industry. And so some questions coming at us will be quite interesting for people within this field. But the reason we really created Unbounded Thinking here is to think about traditional ways of thinking and how to challenge that, how to push the envelope a little bit in the ways that we look at thinking differently. And cognitive diversity is all about that. It's really fundamental in much of this, especially connected to the topic that we're talking about today and creating that dream team. But the definition of cognitive diversity that we use is the inclusion of people who have different styles of problem solving and can offer unique perspectives because they think differently. And I'll give you a bit of an example here. So this individual here, his name is Sam. He is a psychologist, and he was tasked with providing mental health supports to those folks that are homeless. And that was his sole focus, not to tackle homelessness, but to address the mental health concerns. And so he worked away at this, but he found that the problem was too big. The problem that was surrounding these individuals was larger than just treatment for mental health. In fact, he saw that there were so many factors that it was probably a bit of a deterrent in him helping the people as best he could. So what he did was he decided to then tackle the larger problem. But to do that, he decided to bring in different ways of thinking. So he brought in other psychologists. He brought in other specialists. He brought in other people who had experiential knowledge of actually what it was like to be addicted, to be homeless, to experience complex trauma. He brought them all together and had them bring their collective brain power to solving the concept, to solving the problem of homelessness. And he attacked this first in Utah. And what they came up with was amazing, collectively was amazing, because it seems kind of, well, pretty simple, really, when you think about it. But what they did was they provided permanent housing to the homeless. And a lot is like, well, obviously, but a lot of people weren't thinking that because they were so solely focused on certain aspects of it. They didn't look at it as a whole. And what they found was that those that got permanent housing had a foundation on which to heal, to build supports and things like that, which eventually ended homelessness in Utah. And they're working in Phoenix at the moment. And that's incredible. It's incredible that he was humble enough to go, I can't tackle this by myself, but I need different thinkers around me in order to find the best way forward. Now, it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. And so a really fun one we like to talk about here is thinking about cognitive diversity in the laboratory, right? So it's starting to get measured. And one company wanted to challenge a team of scientists on how to measure it. So all these PhD scientists, all from the same disciplines, came together for this biotech company to explore creating diverse teams. They brought their collective brain power toward it, but they actually never finished this project. They never finished the task. The reason being was that they were all of such a similar mindset that they couldn't agree. They couldn't really find common ground because there was such a debate amongst them. So it actually ended up as a failure in the end, even though they brought together the brightest and the smartest people. Now, a more real example is we've all heard of the escape room. We've probably all attended an escape room or been dragged to an escape room. And typically it can be kind of a frustrating experience, especially because we tend to surround ourselves with people with similar personalities, of similar backgrounds and things like that. So if you have a group of similar thinkers that are now going into a situation where they need to escape a room, well, it doesn't always go very well. In fact, it rarely goes very well. You need a diverse collection of thinkers in order to look at problems differently and attack it differently. But why is it? Why is it now that we think so differently? There is a ton of science, and I'm sure there's folks here that know all about the brain science of this. But there's a lot of research behind this as to why we think differently. And the best way to kind of look at it is that it is a maze. Every problem and the way that our brain discerns it, really thinks about it, is kind of a maze. And the way that we find the exit to that maze is unique towards us because of our lenses, because we're not robots so far. So far as I know, we could be cyborgs, who knows? But we are not robots. And so we need to acknowledge that. We need to think about that. But it happens everywhere. And another really interesting example is a big, powerful company like Google, who thought, oh, you know what? We're going to tackle this problem as well. We're going to really invest in really creating the best dream team, because this is what this is all about, right? This is bringing together the greatest dream team. So Google went and hired the brightest and the smartest and the most capable, and they put them into a room together and thought, boom, we got the dream team, because everybody here has multiple PhDs. They are, laureates. They're the smartest people in the world, but it didn't work again. It didn't work again because they didn't invite diversity into the team. Instead, they thought smart intelligence clearly is the biggest benefit of creating our dream team. So let's do that. Let's bring all these intelligent people together. But it didn't work. It did not work. And man, it is threaded throughout history and throughout our pop culture, throughout so much of what we do. The fact that we think if you were intelligent and we bring enough intelligent people together, you will come to a masterful conclusion. But that's not always the case. We need folks from different lenses. There's a great example, too, of a fairly recent movie. Do people know Don't Look Up? I can't see anyone, so I'm assuming you're raising and thrusting your hands in the air going, yes, this film is hilarious. Ha, ha, ha. Adam McKay. There we go. I see someone has raised their hand. But what's awesome is there's a post-credit scene where all the smartest and richest, well, probably more the richest people in the world have devised this rocket to escape the Earth that gets hit by a comet. Spoilers, sorry. So they escape to a new planet that is full of the richest people in the world because they could clearly handle that. So they land on this planet and they immediately get attacked by aliens and are just decimated because you've got the wrong people to start building a new society. You filled the rocket full of all the same kind of thinkers and all motivated by the same things. And so disaster, we've basically sent them to their doom. And I love that as an example because really, if they had thought about this a little different, if they had brought a little cognitive diversity, it would have been a different outcome, I imagine.
Thanks, Tristan. Just give me a minute while I finish my popcorn after listening to all that. That was good. So yeah, when we actually think about creating good teams, right, it's important to know how teams develop, right? Most have probably heard of or seen this concept around forming, storming, norming, and performing, right? It's from Bruce Tuckman's team development model. It's back from the 60s, right? There's lots of research out there around team development. And if you have any different models that you like, please throw them in the chat. But this model does a really good job at showing development over time in relation to performance, right? And if you haven't seen this model before, very easy to understand. Forming is a team coming together, right? Or someone new joining. Storming, it's all about the conflict, right? That's when the egos start to present themselves, right? Norming is like what Tristan talked about there with Google, how it's not until you create norms within your team that's where you start to function properly. And then performing, finally, this is where you want to be. This is the dream team that you're looking for, right? Everybody's sharing ideas, talking about mistakes. Conflict becomes productive, right? Where you're trying to improve ideas, not bring people down. Right. And the intent of showing this model to everyone is that all teams go through this process or something similar. Right. And then the question for everybody is, well, what if we could speed this up? Right. So that's what we really focus on when we talk about dream teams. So a concept we've all heard about, emotional intelligence. We throw the social part in there as well. But the problem is that we don't really give this concept the recognition that it deserves. Right. And I think of it like this, right? You're cruising down the highway, right? You've got the family in the car, it's Saturday morning, you're going to the mountains, everyone's happy, right? And then someone cuts you off, right? What level of rage out of 5 do you go to, right? If anyone's willing to say they go to a 5, please throw it in the chat. I want to just make sure that there are these people out there. Talking about this stuff, I've tried to get myself down to a 2, but even at a 3, right? You're honking your horn, you're staring them down as you drive past, which is the most useless thing in the world because you realize that does nothing, right? But then you're probably throwing hand gestures at them, you're probably swearing at them. Now, think about how much impact did that one small event have on your decisions and your behavior, right? So when you think about emotional and social intelligence, don't limit it to your perception of how we should manage our emotions, like someone's sad in the office, right? No. Think about it in terms of how you manage your decisions and how you interact with other people. Now, go a step further and think about it in terms of how your team functions, especially around innovation and problem solving, right? So anything you can do to improve this area is so important to building good teams. And it'll obviously help you move through those 4 team development stages quicker if you have this focus within your own team. So psychological safety, a concept I would say that 99% of people have heard and understand and get it. But if you have that diverse group, right, you've got a really cognitive diverse group now. But if no one speaks up, does it matter if you have diversity? Not at all, right? This is psychological safety. And if you can see on the left hand, right, it's around the fear of messing up. Because there's a blame culture, right? You're less likely to share ideas, and therefore innovation is so limited, right? Because everyone's kind of afraid. It's kind of a weird storming environment, right? So this is all about leveraging diversity, because even if you have that diverse group, if you don't share your thoughts, then it just doesn't work, So you want to build a team that learns from failure, especially in the startup world, right? If you're not learning from failure in the startup world, you failed right away, right? And then you've got people who are actually sharing ideas, and then that finally leads to that team that is truly innovative, right? That dream team. So we could have really just jam-packed this whole presentation full of the benefits of cognitive diversity. We wanted to take more of a story route and talk about some real life examples and that, but we wanted to throw up 3 that we feel are really, really important for you guys to take away. The act of being able to solve problems faster, right? Tristan talked about this study, right? In terms of teams that are diverse naturally finish problems a lot faster than teams that aren't as diverse, right? And this is a pretty new area, like we've touched on, a lot more to be studied on it, but it's a good start, right? So the idea that teams can solve problems quicker because of their diversity, that's a huge point when it comes to building teams. Another one is really reducing biases. Again, having people who think differently, reducing cognitive bias, go through that to your psychology friends, right? That is a massive thing to be talking about when you're talking about building diverse teams, right? A groupthink I have as just one example. So many different biases out there that you could refer back to team dynamics, right? But groupthink is where everybody just agrees and kind of does the same thing. No. Like, let's bring in diverse people and break that up. And then finally, building a culture of innovation. Very vague, open statement, but the reason we have it in there is that people who think differently prevent that stagnation of a business or a startup, so it doesn't die that slow death where everyone's thinking the same, everyone's got the blinders on, right? And it ends up just leading to this, oh crap, we didn't think about that, and then ultimately leading to them not surviving as a company. So I wanted to wrap this section up with this amazing new concept, not really a concept, but a collection of ideas, right? That is DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a byproduct of what's coming out with these discussions is that cognitive diversity, it brings a lot more attention to these areas, right? But the challenge that comes with it is that cognitive diversity, it's obviously not visible, to the eye, right? Because it's about how we think. Right. So it's still super important when it comes to solving problems and innovation. So if you're looking at building your own team, or if you guys are talking about DEI within your own environment, make sure you keep this in mind, right? Because they are so important in the workplace nowadays, but just as important if you're a company that's trying to be innovative or solve problems, understanding how everybody thinks within that team is just as important.
So when we're going to start building our dream team, it's important to start to do that assessment about ourselves. And the way that we use it, or the way that we approach it here at Unbounded, is that we've built thinking profiles. We've built ways that you can learn about yourself before you figure out how you work best with others, what you contribute to the team. And all of this is still rooted in the research done with cognitive diversity. Right. And we approach 3 different domains there within that. The first one is the cognitive group diversity. So basically looking at where you fit within the group, where that is, how that dynamic is affected, and what's all surrounding that. The next area that is in our unbounded thinking profiles is the conscientious diversity. So basically, what are the personalities? What is what are people bringing to the table as far as who they are? And the last one that we mix in there as well is cognitive styles indicator. So this is basically, what is it? What kind of, thinking style, archetype are you that you bring to this table as well? So we've come up with 8 different profiles here, 8 different ways to approach who you are and what are your habits. Very similar to a lot of typologies. In fact, all this research is, all these are created with the Myers-Briggs, with all this great information in mind, so that we can build our own, so that we've got a way for you to display a badge of who you are, how you work in a team, so that others understand that. We've got the artist, the craftsperson, the farmer, the inventor, the investigator, the peacemaker. the warrior, and the explorer. Right? And when we recognize who we are, it's not about assembling a team of artists like myself here. It's not about that. It's not about making sure that our team is full of the same kind of person. No, no, no. That's the same thing that we were talking about, the Steve Jobs kind of idea. Instead, it's about knowing what you are and being able to bring in more diverse thinking. So looking at myself here, I'm intuitive versus critical thinker. I'm innovative versus a strategic thinker. I'm a people-focused versus results-focused thinker. And also you can see how I work with others, the ways that I lean towards my communication, my pace, my seriousness, my dynamic, and my trust. It gives me a cheat sheet. It gives me a scorecard to understand my habits, my ways of thinking, and then maybe going and approaching others and understanding how they think so that we know how to get the best from one another. Sorry, Daryl's popped in the chat here a little thing about Alberto Savoia, who is an absolute genius when it comes to really looking at prototyping and things like that. Just want to do a shout out. I love his book so much. Anyway, back to the presentation. So here's a comparison between Shannon and myself. And as you can see, we're actually fairly similar in a lot of things. We're both innovative versus being strategic. So we like to think about the big picture. We like to think like, oh, we could go to the moon. We could come up with flying cars and all that kind of thing. But when it comes to strategy, that's not necessarily our best trait. And so we need someone like Ali to kind of ground us and be able to help us think about the minutia. Also, we are people-focused versus results. We like to go, whether it's a superpower or a curse, we like to focus on the people. We like to follow the people and make sure that we are understanding their intentions and where they go on this twisty, windy road versus thinking about necessarily what we're going to get out of this interaction. So understanding myself, understanding Shannon, I start to figure out how we're going to work together, even though we have a lot of similarities. But if we look at this in a massive team dynamic, you're able to see where you fit on the positioning here, on the grid, where you bring certain aspects to a team and where others can support maybe some of your deficits or where you can help lift others up. And I think Paramita and Maria were having a giggle at this because they could see themselves within this as I think Paramita might be more of a people person and Maria might be more of, or Marina might be more results, sorry. More of a results type person. And so they could see where their styles started to complement one another and where one maybe focuses on one area and the other is able to shore up and provide support in another.
She's the person, she would be like, let's go ahead and do it. And I would be the person who sometimes pulls back and says, wait a minute, let us first work on what are we trying to do, who are we trying to work with. And yeah, sometimes it's frustrating, but as you said, it's like I want to do this and she wants to do that, but then we come to a balance, and I find that it's always much better that way.
That's really cool. What's amazing about that is you've understood the dynamics of your team, how you work together best, and recognizing and appreciating the way that you think, Paramita, and the way that you think, Marina. Is amazing, is an amazing asset that can help you tackle problems differently and bring your collective skill set to that problem from each perspective.
Yes, absolutely. So Shannon, would you, I know that you sent us the slide deck. If you want, I can pull it up at my end.
I've actually got it here as well. I've got it here. I can do it if you like.
Yeah.
How about I share that? There we go. All good. Hopefully you're seeing my screen.
Yes, and we are seeing, you probably have it on. We can hear like the captions coming up as well.
Oh. Oh my, what's happened there? That's hilarious. I have my, this is amazing. I think I've got my CC, my closed captioning on here. How does one live transcript? No, that's so wild. I don't know how to stop that.
Can
That's
you hear me, Tristan?
I can.
I apologize, guys. My computer froze.
No worries. I'll tell you what. I'm not going to worry about the closed captioning. I do apologize if that is distracting, but I'm just going to keep on motoring here, folks, and just hand it over to Shannon to talk about the team. Boom.
All righty, thank you. So, talking about building dream teams, we've only got a couple of slides left, but my computer's totally frozen on my end. Jump to the next one there, Tristan, please.
Mm-hmm.
So our model around building dream teams, right, is that first step, like we talked about, is building that emotional and social intelligence. Absolute important step in terms of trying to build out that fully performing team in terms of our team development stages, right? Step 2, speed up psychological safety in any way that you can, right? The idea of being able to share ideas and, making mistakes, that culture of learning, again, that's a second very important part about building a dream team. And then finally, once you're actually ready and you're in that performing stage, now you're ready to improve how you innovate. So that all comes down to creating space to innovate, right? Making sure that people are sharing their ideas and you're capturing, their ideas as well. So that we just talked about a snapshot of cognitive diversity within team development today, but this is a training program for us around building dream teams and also building, innovation specialists as well. But yeah, in the whole scheme of things, this is how we really focus on building dream teams.
So I love these subtitles are wild. If there's anything, typically in a presentation, you're probably going to forget about 90% of it. I mean, if we're honest, we're going to forget probably about 90% of this. So if I can impart anything, if anything can really stick in, I would love for you to focus on how people think rather than what they do. Look at what their thought patterns are versus what that outcome is, and that'll help you understand those folks a little better. And also create some space and time to innovate, even as a startup. I think what we do is we think innovation needs to be piled onto our shoulders on top of everything else, when really we should make time within our schedules to do it. We need to actually look at innovation as an essential skill. So stop thinking about it as an add-on to your day versus an essential part of your schedule. And lastly, you got to do something about it. We got to get off our butts and go do something about it, right? How are you going to use cognitive diversity to help your existing team or a team you are going to join shortly? Why not use some of this learning to go, hey, I want to know how this person thinks a little more, especially if maybe you're butting heads against them. How can I learn about them a little more and how the way that they think can be an asset to what we are doing together? So this is just, again, to emphasize the fact that they need to be intentional to innovate. We need to make sure that we are removing something from our lives that can make space for innovation, because it's no longer a buzzword. It's no longer a catchphrase. It is a survival skill. And so we need to be intentional in what we do with it. And so, folks, please reach out if you want to chat more about this. I mean, we'll stick around for some questioning here, but if you want to talk more, reach out to us, or you can have a listen to a podcast that we host called What's Next? Innovation Forecasting, where we start to take a look at the future of people, of an industry, of a company, and try to figure out what does that future look like and how do we look backward so that we're building relationships, making ways to see that future realized. So from myself and from Shannon, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And we're going to have a little question and answer period, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I think we are going to have tons and tons of questions. So everybody, please feel free to put in your questions in the chat. while we wait for people to put in their questions or raise your hand, we will be monitoring for raised hands to see if you have a question, and you can just unmute and ask that yourself. Um, I did have one question, and it's like a burning question for me.
Mhm.
At the Health Innovation Hub, it's very much to do with startups. And sometimes startups are, let's face it, one person, or it's sometimes a couple of people, co-founders. And one of the things that they don't have is resource. So they don't have money because if you're thinking about like larger teams, bigger organizations, sometimes they have got money. And so even if they're not making a right hire, you know what, you can always make another hire.
Mhm.
But for the life of a startup, they need to make a really important strategic decisions. And that is when they're building out the team.
Mhm.
So how would you suggest a startup look at? So they might be thinking, you know what, we are just, we need this skill set. So should they go for the skill set and hunt for that? Or should they think then we need to think about diversity and really remember that we are here in the innovation game?
Yeah. Dude, you want to start this off, Shan?
Oh, I know these questions are going to get us both going, but I think, what comes to mind, Tristan, the discussion we've had around Usain Bolt. Can you share that one with me? Because I think it brings context as to where cognitive diversity fits into it, right?
Yeah, it's a neat thing, and I wish this was my story, but it was wonderful. I was just watching an individual, Mr. Saida, I can't remember his first name, but he was talking about that cognitive diversity doesn't, it's not for everything. And I love that idea because we got to think about what it is good for and what it isn't very good for. So he used the idea of if I was coming up with the world's greatest relay team, the world's greatest like Olympic relay team, well, I wouldn't necessarily fill that with a lot of cognitively diverse folks. I wouldn't necessarily look for someone who was slow, someone who was fast, someone who was good at jumping and that kind of thing. Instead, really what I do is I'd clone Usain Bolt 4 times. And that would be my dream team because we are laser focused on a simple task, and that is completing a race. But problems aren't like that. Right? Nothing is, or very rarely are things that simple. So with complex problems, we need a much more diverse group of thinking. But to answer your question a little more, Paramita, you're exactly right. I think that when you are looking as a solo founder, and I say this a lot, when you're looking to bring people onto your team, a lot of consideration does need to be put into it. You don't just need a warm body to join your team. You don't just need someone that you can call a co-founder. Instead, you need a certain skill set, but also I think that can be in tandem with thinking about a diverse thinker as well. If you can look for a skill set, but then also go with the lens of, and how does this person think? Is it something that is complementary or something that is we don't have in my startup? Then that could be a very huge benefit as well. So it's kind of a twofold effect. You're looking for someone who is able to bring, obviously accomplish a certain skill. If you're desperate for a marketing person, you're going to try to look for marketing first, but then also look at how are they going to integrate in my team? How do they think? How are they going to complement the places where I am deficit as far as not just skills, but in the ways that I approach thinking? And that always lends itself to a much stronger team. And what I tell everyone that asks me that question is try before you buy. Right? Get to know that person. Make sure there is a sort of a warming honeymoon-esque period, because when you're in a startup together and the contract is signed and the ink is still wet, if something happens, to dissolve that is harder than dissolving a marriage. It is insanely hard to get out of a co-founder situation if you find that you are not working together well or giving enough perspective in the ways that you think. So kind of a long-winded answer to that. I hope I answered that.
I love it. It was really great. Shannon, did you have anything to add on to that?
I think as a solo founder, right, take advantage of your ecosystem, right, which is the Health Innovation Hub, right? Take advantage of the free conversations that you can have. Hey, what do you think about this idea? What do you like? Where we're coming from is just to say, hey, make it part of your mental model when you're out there looking at problems. Think, how does this person think differently, right? The value of having someone around you that thinks differently. And then the next step is, okay, what situation am I in? What resources do I have? Am I a single co-founder? Let's go talk to the Health Innovation Hub, right? Do I have a full team? Okay, now we're going to actually dig a little bit deeper into it. So I think for us, it's really just putting it into your, like Tristan said, your lens of how you look at problems, and then being able to squeeze it into your specific situation.
Yeah, you're right. And when you're talking about a dream team, it's not necessarily always like having that company or not talking, because even anybody doing a project, and you talked about that, the scientists, and they're trying to work on a project, and that's exactly it. They're not there for creating a company, but they're working on a scientific project, and still it fails because everybody thinks in the same way. It thinks in the same way of like solving a problem. So I guess my second question would be to ask you, um, suppose a team is not functioning that well, and then it's already created, it's already there, they're in that team development cycle, they're maybe in that storming stage. And now what could they do to pull themselves out of that trench that they find themselves in and really start performing? Would cognitive diversity at that point in a team which is already formed, would it work?
You want me to go first? And
Give her.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Tristan talked about it, and so I'll reinforce it, right? It's not just about building that perfect team from scratch. Not many situations allow for that, right? If you're a very advanced organization where hey, we need to build a team for this project, and let's keep in mind the cognitive diversity of that. Yeah, we're a little bit away from that. So with teams that already exist, I go back to that first, well, one of the first concepts around emotional and social intelligence, right? Building more awareness around yourself and around the people that are on the team. That is step one, right? So it doesn't matter who's on your team. It really comes down to that self-awareness. And now I need to know everyone else in the room. Now we can manage ourselves better. And then at that point, and again, you build on that psychological safety, but then at that point you go, okay, all right. So we know we've got a bunch of really strategic thinkers. That's why we can't get out of our own heads and try and think outside the box. Let's go and talk to this person. Let's go and talk to that team, or let's bring someone else in. So I just take it back to that first step is just building up that emotional and social intelligence with the team that you have, and then you can be that dream team. So you don't need to, you're trying to talk about the American dream team, with the NBA, the basketball, of just throwing in all the best players. That doesn't happen, right? And then that's not the point. The point is to understand yourself and the others, and that to us is what a dream team is all about. Tristan?
Yeah, you know what, we're actually doing this at the moment with a major construction company, is working with them with teams that are already formed and looking at ways where they can use this cognitive diversity, this self-assessment essentially, to make them better, because a lot of teams are operating when they're making a lot of errors, or there's incidents and accidents happening, or they're just not getting along or functioning well. So we're working with them right now with these existing teams to go back, just take a step back and do that bit of self-assessment, and going here, by learning about yourself, by learning about your coworker, by learning about the way that you can actually get together now, you can achieve a better status as a team. You achieve much better success as a team. And it can be tricky with a lot of buy-in in traditional businesses like construction. When you're on the yard, and introducing psychology in that is a little tricky, but it's not impossible. And when you're able to show people the outcomes of putting in that work early, then absolutely they're able to realize it, contextualize it, and go, well, I kind of do want this. I want to be better performing. I want to know what Larry, Jim, and Phil are doing and how they work, because we're all interlaced in how we build this project together. So if I can understand them better, it actually leads to less frustration on my part, and I'm actually able to enjoy the dynamic of my team currently.
Right, I love that
Every
answer.
team Oh, sorry, I was going to say every team is a dream team waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's a different way of looking at it. That you don't have to build a dream team. You just have to make yourself aware of it.
Yes, you're 100% right, especially if you're like starting as like a smaller organization and then slowly and steadily growing and building. So from the chat, Daryl had put in a really interesting comment, and you mentioned that, Tristan, as well, about the book. So I would like to invite Daryl, if you wanted to speak a little bit more about your comment. And Tristan, if you wanted to discuss more around the book.
Oh, Alberto Savoya's book, The Right It?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I dearly love that book, and I love every story that comes from that man's mouth. But what's interesting, I guess, how can I relate this to the dream team a little bit? I wonder, is well, you know what? Alberto's all about pressure testing and figuring out and doing little things to see if you're on the right track or to get yourself out of thought land. And what thought land is all the theories and concepts and solutions in your brain, but nothing in the real world. So I guess we could relate kind of what Alberto Savoya is talking about is that a lot of this work can't just live up here. It can't just exist in the theoretical. We actually have to go and test it and apply it and see what works. And when we can see what works and what might not, then that helps us, gives us a little encouragement into really being able, really being able to go and pursue the right course, because we've done a little work in the real world about pressure testing things that do and do not work, and so we're able to be less risk averse to maybe putting ourselves out there in exploring things like cognitive diversity, because we're able to approach it in maybe a more of an Alberto Savoya way, where we are prototyping things like that. So I don't know if that answers that or if it was a question, but it's an awesome book, Daryl. Absolutely.
He did mention that he doesn't have a microphone, and he has a comment. Cognitive diversity sounds too risky and time consuming for a startup. Time is spent on trying to get to know the personality of other coworkers and not on getting the startup to achieve rapid growth that is attractive to investors. That is a tough call.
Sure. I don't know if they need to be mutually exclusive. And I think Shannon's got a good point in here as well in the chat. Do you want to speak to that, Shannon?
It's a big discussion, right? I mean, we're not here on a soapbox trying to force this idea down people's throats. It's more of a new way of thinking when we're talking about building teams. Because in the startup world, we hear a lot about find your salesperson, find your marketing person, find your CEO, right? It's all about titles, right? And we're saying, well, wait a minute. There's this new area of thinking that more diverse teams solve problems faster. So like that was my point back in the chat at a very high level of, if you've got two startups doing the exact trying to solve the exact same problem, right? 10 engineers here, 10 engineers there, and one of these teams is more diverse. As we said before, more diverse teams solve problems faster. Which one's going to be more attractive to the investors, right? The one that's ahead of you, or you, because you didn't really want to think about this too much. So it's not that wasn't a debate in your point there, Daryl. It's super important, and I agree. We all come from the startup world, so we know the pressure of getting things done, right? But I think where we're coming from is to say, hey, if you can kind of at least consider this, right, when you're thinking about problem solving, and when you're thinking about bringing on new people, it's less about trying to get to know the personalities of the people that you work with, more about just understanding that you as a business will be more successful if you consider how your team thinks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
There's two great questions in the chat, and in the interest of time, I'm going to ask these two questions. Sure. One of them is from Arun. He asks, what happens when the team members realize that innovation is the way forward, but the leader does not? How does a team tackle such situations?
Yeah, that's really hard when because for things to really happen, it needs to be really bought in from each level. right? And this is kind of where a lot of teams or a lot of businesses that feel like they are innovative fail, is the frontline workers recognize when things could be better or recognize innovation potential for a company. But if leadership isn't giving space for that to happen, if they aren't encouraging and really helping the innovators, the innovative thinkers, help them pursue these ideas and really realize them, then it's going to collapse. And they can't take it on their shoulders along with their duties. There's just no room for that. Me as a worker who works 40 hours a week, why would I extend myself to then pursue an innovative idea for my business if they're not like accommodating that? So that is really difficult. How to approach that? There could be many ways. It depends, I guess, a lot on the company itself, on how traditional that company has been and how motivated they are to actually change. Because if they don't see that motivation, it is, as a worker, it's very difficult to hold the leadership accountable, especially if they are walking the walk, they're just talking the talk. There's techniques in behavioral science, which I'll throw to good old Shannon there, about change management and ways to influence from the bottom up. But fundamentally, if the business, from a leadership perspective, does not want to change, wants to keep doing the same thing every day and expect different results, well, it's very hard for you as someone who is frontline to make that change. So yeah, really, I'm not sure. Maybe it's time to start your own startup. Maybe it's time for you to be the boss and pursue something where you are able to create a culture of innovation. Or maybe it's joining a business, which is easier said than done, of course. But finding a business that actually recognizes that innovation needs space to develop. What do you think, Shannon?
Yeah.
I know we have 1 minute left and one question. So you know what? There's no theory coming from me except for we're in an entrepreneurial space right now, right? Mm-hmm. Treat your leadership like an investor. You wouldn't go away and say, well, my leader doesn't care, so I don't care, right? My investor doesn't want to invest, so I don't care. You go back to the drawing board and you say, okay, we really need to understand our why here, right? Like our value proposition. Treat your leadership like an investor. And then rather than just saying, well, they don't care, we don't care. No, you wouldn't do that if it was your startup trying to talk to an investor, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my only point on that, because we could talk about that one for a long time. That is the business problem of the century, right? How do you get leadership on board? There's a few hundred books on that.
Yeah, and it's always so tricky. Well, we are going to end with the last question, but I would request everybody to, if you're comfortable, to come on camera, because we want to take a picture of all of us. And so while we are doing that, and Marina is going to take the picture, Omer had a question, and this question was very much related to Daryl's question. It's very much on the same lines. So are you asking to concentrate on the product and service in the beginning, then worry about one's feelings? And that is the last question of today.
What do we say? We have a 30-second answer each, Tristan, to keep it to it.
Let's do it. 30 seconds. Bam.
I'm taking a picture right now. So if everybody can. Okay. One more time. Sorry,
that's me.
No. All good. Sorry, one more time here.
Are we ready?
Excellent. Good.
Oh,
yeah.
Wonderful.
I couldn't hold a smile for any longer. I forgot the question. What was it? I'm kidding. Yeah. Feelings part of it. I mean, my response to that, if we're at the grand debate, it's Tristan versus hey, like Tristan said, we're working with construction to roll this out on the front line to talk about emotional intelligence. We'll tell you that's, we're not talking about feelings 1 second, right? It's not about feelings. It's about surviving as a business, because you can problem solve better than anybody else in your area, right? It's about being able to innovate better. It's about decision making. It's about all that kind of stuff. Leave the feelings at the door when it comes to talking about cognitive diversity, because I think there's some sort of clash there, right? Should I focus on the business or people's feelings? No, combine them, because it is about the business at the end, right?
Yeah. The only thing I think of is I don't think it has to be that, like, black or white. I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive. Of course, your product focus, but I've seen companies come together where it is 4 developers that are creating an incredible piece of tech, but then they are now having to manage each other. They're having to manage as people. And although they have the most incredible tech, they dissolved. So it's not, again, necessarily thinking about your feelings per se, but it's thinking about recognizing how people work. Because what they'll do is when you also recruit for that kind of diversity, they challenge you. They challenge your lens. And sometimes that can really reveal amazing opportunities. And so again, I think it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, but of course, a startup has such a focus on their product and the development and trying to get to the next milestone. And it's very, very difficult. And you hold a lot of things. But for long-term sustainability of your business, I think that needs to be sprinkled in. Sprinkled in what you do when you are actively recruiting for more people in your business, is my thought.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, both Shannon and Tristan, for this amazing presentation. Please join me in a round of applause for Shannon, Tristan from Unbounded Thinking.
And
With
thank
that,
you to you guys as well.
Yeah.
Thanks to all of you for coming to the In Conversation, and we welcome you to our next event. Stay tuned.
Absolutely.